Hey guys, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Ghyrson Starn in cEDH and my thought process when building around him. When I started the deck building process, I figured there were three ways I could go about brewing him. The first way I wanted to try brewing him was with the traditional Storm that utilized cards like Firebrand Archer and Kessig Flame Breather to deal massive amounts of damage while we cast instant and sorcery spells. The second way I tried building him was as a tempo deck that utilized small creatures to deal a ton of damage to the table, and then once we find our curiosity effect, we'd be able to draw a ton of cards, and then from there we could kind of transition into like a Storm vibe with some extra turn cards added in. And the third way was as a prison style of deck, utilizing cards that would deal damage to everyone at the table. Now I'm left with the question, which direction do I want to take this deck in, and which way do I think is going to be the most optimal way to take advantage of Ghyrson Starn's ability? The tempo style of deck had a hard time applying pressure to the table, and in addition needed to run less interaction in order to keep up the creature count. Prison style of deck was a very hard one to pull off, mainly because Ghyrson's ability says whenever he deals damage to a permanent or player, this means that you could get hit with one damage and then Ghyrson Starn would shoot you as well. So cards like Pyrrhemia just were off the table and overall made him really awkward in terms of a build around card for a prison style deck in the context of cEDH. Now don't get me wrong, I did have a few issues with the Storm variant as well. The primary one was that this deck really relies on getting a curiosity effect onto Ghyrson Starn and then resolving one of our three Firebrand Archer type effects. The big upside to this is that once you get a curiosity effect on him, Firebrand Archer type effects get really strong once you have multiples of them. So obviously we have the Kessig Flame Breather, Electrostatic Field, and Firebrand Archer. They're going to serve as our main ways to deal damage to the table and allow us to storm off. Stormkiln Artist and Archmage Emeritus are both really great cards for just generating some value in case we don't have one of our curiosity effects out or we don't have one of our Firebrand Archer type abilities out, and that way we can start drawing cards and also just generating a ton of mana while we're storming off, especially since we run a few storm cards in the deck. One creature I do want to bring your attention to is this Loyal Apprentice, and its main job here is going to be to apply pressure in those scenarios, those board states where everything's kind of locked. This card is going to be a little unassuming at first, mainly because we're just producing a 1/1 flyer every turn, but because it's going to deal exactly 1 damage, Ghyrson Starn is going to trigger and deal an additional 2 damage. This damage could add up very quickly, but a really nice thing is that if we're in that mid game, we're kind of just getting these 1/1s out. Once we slap Curiosity onto Ghyrson Starn, all of those tokens that you were making with the Loyal Apprentice are now going to be extra draw triggers for Ghyrson. Fury is an extremely efficient removal spell, being able to deal up to 3 damage to 4 target creatures. The Gilded Drake is going to be fantastic for stealing some really important creatures on our opponent's side of the field. If we move to the instants and sorceries, you're going to notice that I'm not running a ton of these deal 1 damage type of cards that are extremely parasitic to Ghyrson Starn, and that's because without a curiosity effect in our hand, these cards become pretty bad. We do have the End Festivities, which is going to be fantastic for just wiping the board in general, and then if you do happen to have one of those curiosity type effects out, this is going to end up being a great way to draw a bunch of cards. We want to be extremely proactive with our instants and sorceries. In addition to them just being really great for sifting through cards in the early game, once we're trying to storm off, we want to be generating as much card advantage as possible and then turning that card advantage into more mana, which then we can turn into card advantage. Grapeshot has a ton of synergy with Ghyrson Starn, but is also going to be really great if we have an Archmage Emeritus or a Stormkiln Artist because it has that Storm ability. And continuing on with our instants, you're going to see, again, I'm on a lot of proactive type of cards in terms of removal, but also for card advantage. Cards like Chain of Vapor, Geist Wave, and Snap are going to be really great for resetting our dock side. We have a few ways that we can start generating more mana as we are storming off, stuff like Desperate Ritual, Poetic Ritual. The Snap is going to untap lands as well as the Frantic Search, and since we have a lot of instants and sorceries, we're going to have a decent amount of fodder to feed a Dig Through Time. Now we don't have any infinite combos per se, but we do have the Brain Freeze that we can use with Lion's Eye Diamond plus Underworld Breach, and from there we can basically mill out our deck and find the pieces that we need to start pinging the table and generating more and more mana. We don't have a ton of tutors in this deck, so we've got the Dizzy Spell and the Muddle the Mixture that we can use to either find a Curiosity effect or one of our Kessig Flame Breather type cards. Another important part of these Storm style of decks is having interaction or spells that you can cast for free, stuff like Submerge, Pyrokinesis, in addition to just being really great with Ghyrson Starn, can be another way to cast a spell for free. Gut Shot is really great for us as well. Mental Misstep. We can also do some fun shenanigans with our free counter spells during our storm turn to generate more card advantage and possibly mana. Our artifacts are all pretty straightforward. We do have the Curse Totem. Since we don't really have any activated abilities in our deck, we're going to break parity on this really well. It may be a little odd to have these colorless artifacts in the deck since we are a very pip heavy deck, but the primary reason we have these is though we can filter our red mana that we make from rituals into blue mana with some of our artifacts. Of course, we have the Curiosity effects, being Ophidian Eye and Curiosity, in addition to the Mystic Remora and the Rhystic Study that we can use to generate a little bit of card advantage, hopefully, before we get our Curiosity style stuff set up. Now, when you're using these Curiosity effects, remember that these are a May ability. Unfortunately, the Tandem Lookout is not a May ability. Keep that in mind as you're storming off. If you're starting to run out of cards in your library, it might be a good idea to remove the Tandem Lookout before you get into a position where you actually can't cast spells anymore because you're just going to deck out. Another slightly awkward thing about the Tandem Lookout is that if it is already paired with Ghyrson Starn, then you can't have another creature enter and then pair it with the Tandem Lookout, and that's because Tandem Lookout needs to find another unpaired creature, and the wording implies that it needs itself to be unpaired in order to pair it with something. The lands are straightforward as usual, making sure our land base is entering the battlefield untapped and we're getting as much utility as we can. Stuff like Otawara is going to be great for removal, Cephalid Coliseum so we can interact with opponents' Thoracles when they're on the stack. Thanks for checking out the deck, guys. If you liked the video and gained a little bit more perspective about building Manual Storm in cEDH, then be sure to like and subscribe.